people who have lots of thoughts about what I talked about last time, which is essentially how government kind of screwed up housing. None of that actually does anything. First of all, there's a lot of like calling for things and then nothing actually happens. But in the end, like the aspect of housing that almost always needs to be addressed is not only creating more housing, but creating more affordable housing. And the problem is that when people hear affordable housing, they think Section 8, they think subsidized housing, they think of people who are poor, bring crime, that type of thing. And really but really, in truth, it means providing access to housing so people can start building wealth. Welcome back to another episode of Moving Sucks. I am your host, Seth Lejeune. I appreciate all the comments from the last episode, and might have hit a live wire there. There are people who have lots of thoughts about what I talked about last time, which is essentially how government kind of screwed up housing. Everything from, you guys blame government for everything, all the way to, investors are the big bad boogeyman, all the way to illegal immigration. So I personally love talking about politics. I think it's important. And I think that it's something that people should be able to talk about in a courteous manner. And the comments were there was nothing, no keyboard warriors in the comments, but it was something that I was happy to see because I just love kind of chatting about it. I wanted to just kind of extend that episode into this one because I think it's important that we talk about the aggregate, or just kind of in the aggregate, what the realtor's responsibility is to understanding these types of policies, and not just on the, going back into the 80s and market manipulation and all that with interest rates and quantitative easing and printing money and all that, but just actually having an understanding of what's going on in the here and now. And if you've listened to this podcast before, you have heard me talk time and time again about how real estate is local. And it's really, really hard especially on a national political stage, to really be able to address housing. Because it is very local. So, I'm sitting there last year, the debates were happening for the, for the debate for the presidential election. And I'm just kind of rolling my eyes because you've got one side saying, well, we're going to do this. And then the other side saying, well, we have to do this, or we have to stop immigrants from buying houses, or we have to, free up public parks for more land to increase supply. And none of that actually does anything. First of all, there's a lot of like calling for things and then nothing actually happens. Like I said last week, we can't get Congress to agree that the sun is going to rise, let alone put together a comprehensive, complex housing policy. And one of the reasons is because what's good for Kentucky isn't good for New York, and what's good for Florida isn't good for Illinois. So it's really important that the agent understands their local market and what is actually going on. So for me, I live outside of Philadelphia. That's where I generally practice. I'm in Philadelphia. I'm in the city, but I'm also in the surrounding four counties. And every single one of those counties has different issues. So, for example, Delaware County has higher taxes. They just went through a major tax appeal and tax reset. Montgomery County is on the cusp of doing it. Bucks County and Chester County both have them on the books. So just taxes alone, and 4 counties across about 30 miles, all the situations are a little bit different. Now, not totally different. Philadelphia suburbs are generally fantastic. They're great. It's a great market. Lots of schools, meds and eds, which is like medical institutions, hospitals, and lots of universities. Diversified economy. But like you go 20 miles further and it's nothing like the suburbs of Philadelphia. So it's really important that the agent understands what is actually happening in their local market. Now, if they are an agent who services multiple metros and all that, that's fine. That's not who I'm talking about. The problem with a lot of the things that you hear about in the market is that it's just a coverall. It sounds good. It's been whitewashed and tested and focus grouped, and it sounds like it's something that you'd want to hear. Like, immigrants aren't supposed to be buying up houses. Now, truth is, immigrants really aren't buying houses. I've done immigration loans. They are extremely difficult, and I'm going to tell you right now, if you get into a situation where there's a competitive environment, they aren't going to win that house. Like ITIN loans, non-QM, the interest rates are a horror show. They are really hard to underwrite, and they are not something that usually can beat out normal, conventional, or even FHA or VA financing. So, but then on the other side, it's like, well, hey, we're going to tell the big bad investors they're not going to be able to buy houses. Now, what the hell is an investor? Is that mom and pop? Is that something where it's like, BlackRock? Is it big Wall Street, whatever, fat cats? What is that? How do you quantify that? All these things are meant to designed to just curry favor to get you over to their point of view, but none of it is actionable. So the problem with a lot of these things too is that the programs, they create more buyers and they don't create more homes. It's much easier to lower an interest rate and create demand for more housing than actually put a shovel in the ground, put together a program where the government has to go out and buy land, make it affordable, put a cap on the amount of money that they can build it for, and get it where it can be affordable for people. That's like a multi-year thing versus, hey, we're just going to lower interest rates, or hey, we're going to let you defer your mortgage payment for a couple months because there's a pandemic going on. A lot of these programs, they creates more affordability in the short term, but it doesn't actually create more homes. And that is what in some parts of this country we need. Now, there are other episodes of this podcast I have talked about. That is not what people need. And it is a narrative that has been so baked in that people are like, there's no houses, there are no houses. But in the past, like 6 months, I'm starting to talk to more people and they're like, oh, wait, I'm like talking to my buddy down in Georgia and they can't sell their house. Or I'm talking to my buddy in, Texas and like outside of Austin, like they can't sell their house. So people are starting to get the memo. But in the end, like the aspect of housing that almost always needs to be addressed is not only creating more housing, but creating more affordable housing. And the problem is that when people hear affordable housing, they think Section 8, they think subsidized housing, they think of people who are, poor, bring crime, that type of thing. And really but really in truth, it means providing access to housing so people can start building wealth. Because if all you do is rent all your life, it's much harder to get to build wealth in that part of your life, because rents generally will move with the market. So, you pick up and move out of there, you're done. Like you don't get anything. Like the landlord gives you back your deposit if you've been good, and then that's it. Versus buying a house, which, you build equity, you and you get the ability to have proceeds at settlement. So I think that the agent of the future, because we live in this hyper political scene, is going to need to understand what is happening politically in their micro economy. So, for example, there is a airfield right by my house called Wings Field. There is a corporate park at the end of that field that is not doing well in terms of occupancy. It's filled with office complexes. Taxes on those types of properties are commensurate with how full they are. So if you buy a house and you never live there, you still got to pay taxes on the house. If it's vacant, occupied, you have to pay taxes on that house. In commercial, what will happen is if, let's say, it's 25% occupied versus 100% occupied, the taxation will fluctuate. So what's happening in my area is that a lot of these corporate parks are getting tax relief for having such high vacancy. And that makes sense because you have all this work from home. COVID kind of threw everything in flux. Market's kind of slowing down, so people aren't renting out tons of space, expanding. So that is messing with the tax base here in my township, because the municipality is reliant upon the taxes to come in to pay for schools and roads and everything else. So there's a proposal that we tear all these corporate parks down and put in housing, which would be steady income. It would alleviate some of the housing shortfall. But here's the trade-off. You have to, where are those kids going to go to school? Can we put all those cars on the road every morning and night? And we would have to reverse the direction. Those cars wouldn't be coming onto the property in the morning. They would be leaving, and the opposite in the afternoon. So civil engineering would come into play. Is the hospital capacity appropriate? Social services, municipal services, fire company capacity, police force. So it's always like a very, very tenuous mix of, do we have the resources to allow to change the usage of this this land? So that's just a small example of the things that you would run into when you really understand the local housing dynamics of your community. Unfortunately, there's a lot of agents who get fed shiny objects. They get fed the national statistics. There's something called Keeping Current Matters, which is a great resource, but there's no granularity to it. There's nothing local about it, but it's just a broad thing to just kind of throw out there to say, hey, I'm aware of like what the housing trends are. That's fine. They might be general housing trends, but they're almost completely irrelevant to what you should be concerned about in the here and now when it comes to you moving your family, whether it's a good time for you to buy or not. One thing I will say is that just like how all markets are local, your situation is unique. And even if you are just a very ordinary, quote unquote, first-time home buyer or ordinary first-time home seller, you need to realize that every single one of you each and every one of you is unique in terms of when's the right timing, how much money you need, where you're commuting to, how many kids you have. And that is something that your agent should be able to take that situation and apply it to their local market and make sure that it's the right situation for you. Now, something really obvious would be like, hey, I want to buy a house here. And it's like, well, they're going to be, abandoning the quarry and building massive warehouses behind this house. Like, that's something that would be obvious, that if your agent doesn't know about that, then, shame on them. But there's more nuanced things like, is there a lot of development coming in? Will the class sizes in your elementary school balloon? What does that mean? Is there going to have to be an expansion on the school? My son and in his elementary school spent his last year in a trailer because they were expanding the footprint of his school, and they didn't have any space for him while they built it, so they put him into trailers. And like, for me, like, that's fine. That's a first world problem. But that should be noted when you're moving into a school district that, your kids might be in a class of 35, not 25. And if that's something that's important to you, then you should obviously do your own research, but your agent should understand kind of like what's going on. Now, here, luckily in Philadelphia, there's not a whole lot of like massive construction going on. But when you're talking about small townships, smaller school districts like we have outside of Philadelphia, there is a possibility that that even a little bit of development would affect your children's school experience. So I just want to get on here and mention that if you're interviewing an agent and you're just starting the process, of course you want to get with a lender and you want to have a conversation about where you're moving and everything like that. But ask another question. Ask a question of whether they understand, and you don't have to say, hey, do you actually know what you're talking about? You say, hey, so like, tell me about what's kind of going on in this township, like in the school district. Is there a lot of construction? Like, what's the politics? Like, who's in control? Are the Republicans or the Democrats? Like, what's the school district like? Now, agents aren't allowed to comment on school district quality, and it gets them into some gray area. But if they at least even know where to send you to get you coached up on that type of stuff, but definitely ask them about development in the area, what they think could possibly be, coming down the pike. It's a good question to ask an agent. And honestly, even if they don't know the answer and they got to go get it, they'll be a better agent for it. So I hope you guys find that helpful. Just keep in mind, guys, that the government's going to talk about all kinds of stuff. They're going to call for things. They're going to say that they're going to do this. They're going to say they're going to do that. It all comes down to your situation. Moving sucks. We've established that. It doesn't have to suck so much if you're prepared with the right information. Thanks. See you.